Hello there, and welcome to Worlds Beyond Seen. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and prepare for a journey into one of the ocean's most profound mysteries. Before we begin, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue exploring these fascinating topics, and it ensures that more curious minds can discover these stories of wonder hidden in the depths of our world. Tonight, we're going to descend into darkness. Not the darkness of space, though what we'll explore feels equally alien. We're diving deep beneath the waves, past the sunlit shallows where dolphins play, beyond the twilight zone where bioluminescent creatures drift like living stars, down into the abyssal plains where pressure crushes, cold bites, and light has never reached. And there, in that hostile, ancient realm, we keep finding ghosts. Not spirits or phantoms, but something far more tangible and far more mysterious. We find creatures that science declared extinct millions of years ago, fish that should have vanished with the dinosaurs, sharks that belong in fossil beds, not fishing nets, animals so ancient, so unchanged, that when we finally see them alive, it's like discovering that dragons still fly, or that mammoths still roam. These are the living fossils of the deep sea, and every time we find one, it rewrites what we thought we knew about evolution, extinction, and the hidden resilience of life itself. The story begins, as many great mysteries do, with a single impossible discovery. December 1938. The coast of South Africa. A fishing trawler named the Nerine hauled up its nets after a routine trip, and among the usual catch lay something that would shake the scientific world to its foundation. It was a fish, certainly, but unlike any fish the crew had ever seen, nearly 5 feet long, covered in heavy armor-like scales, with strange lobed fins that looked almost like stubby legs. Its body was a deep steel blue, its eyes large and ancient-looking. The creature was clearly dead, but even in death it commanded attention, as though it carried with it the weight of ages. The captain, knowing something unusual when he saw it, set it aside. When the boat docked, word reached Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer, the young curator of the local museum in East London. She arrived at the docks to inspect the catch, and the moment she saw the fish, she knew it was extraordinary. She sketched it frantically, preserving every detail she could before the specimen began to deteriorate in the summer heat. Then she sent those drawings to Professor J.L.B. Smith, South Africa's leading ichthyologist, along with an urgent letter describing what she'd found. Smith's response became legendary. His telegram back to Courtenay-Latimer read simply, "Most important preserved skeleton and gills equals fish described." Because what Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer had found, pulled from the depths off the South African coast, was a coelacanth, a fish that, according to every textbook, every fossil record, every scientific paper on the subject, had gone extinct 66 million years ago. At the same time, the dinosaurs disappeared from the Earth, and yet here it was, real and solid and undeniably alive, or at least recently alive. The coelacanth's existence sent shockwaves through the scientific community. It was as if someone had discovered a living Tyrannosaurus rex grazing in a pasture, or a pterodactyl perched on a telephone wire. This wasn't just unexpected, it was theoretically impossible. The fossil record had spoken clearly. Coelacanths were gone, wiped out in the Great Cretaceous extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs. But the fossil record, it turned out, had lied, or rather, it had remained incomplete, hiding secrets in the one place humans rarely looked, the deep ocean. Professor Smith named the fish Latimeria chalumnae, honouring both Courtenay-Latimer and the Chalumnar River near where it was caught. But naming it was the easy part. Understanding what its existence meant, that would take decades. The coelacanth wasn't just any fish. It belonged to a group called lobe-finned fishes, ancient creatures whose ancestors had crawled out of the water hundreds of millions of years ago to become the first land vertebrates. Every amphibian, every reptile, every mammal, including us, traces its lineage back through these lobe-finned pioneers. Scientists had studied coelacanth fossils for over a century, watching their evolution through the fossil record, seeing them thrive in ancient seas, then gradually disappear as the world changed. The last fossils dated to the late Cretaceous period. After that, nothing. A gap of 66 million years with no evidence, no traces, no hint that these creatures might still exist, until 1938, when one surfaced in a fishing net, and the gap became not an absence but a mystery. Where had they been? How had they survived? What refuge had sheltered them through mass extinctions, climate changes, and the rise and fall of entire ecosystems? It took 14 years to find a second specimen. Smith spent over a decade searching, offering rewards, distributing thousands of leaflets showing drawings of the fish to fishermen across the western Indian Ocean. His obsession became well known, even legendary. He believed the fish must live somewhere in the deep waters between Africa and Madagascar, probably around the Comoro Islands. He was right. In 1952, a fisherman named Ahmed Hussein Abdullah caught another coelacanth off the Comoros and claimed Smith's reward. This time, the specimen was fresh, well preserved, and the world got its first real look at a living fossil. What they saw was remarkable. The coelacanth was not a relic barely clinging to survival. It was a perfectly adapted deep-sea predator, beautifully designed for its environment. Those odd, lobed fins, so different from the ray fins of most fish, moved in an alternating pattern, almost like legs walking. The fish could swim upside down, backward, even perform underwater headstands. Its body was covered in thick, rough scales called cosmoid scales, armor that had served its ancestors well for hundreds of millions of years. But perhaps most remarkable was where and how it lived. Coelacanths weren't struggling survivors in some marginal habitat. They thrived in deep, volcanic caves along steep underwater slopes, typically between 300 and 1,000 feet down, sometimes deeper. During the day, they sheltered in these caves, hanging motionless in the current, their bodies perfectly still. At night, they emerged to hunt, drifting through the darkness to catch squid, octopus, and fish. The depth they inhabited explained their long invisibility. Before modern fishing techniques and deep diving technology, humans rarely ventured into these zones. The coelacanth had been living its life in the deep, unchanging waters of the Indian Ocean for millions of years, completely unknown to science. While above, the world transformed. Since those first discoveries, more populations have been found. In the waters off Tanzania, Kenya, Mozambique, Madagascar, and South Africa, individual coelacanths have been spotted, filmed, and studied. In 1997, scientists discovered an entirely separate species in Indonesia, thousands of miles from the African populations, indicating that coelacanths had a wider distribution than anyone suspected. Today, researchers estimate that perhaps 500 to 1,000 individual coelacanths survive, scattered across several isolated populations. They're critically endangered, vulnerable to bycatch in deep-sea fishing nets, but they persist as they have for hundreds of millions of years. Studying living coelacanths has revealed astonishing details about their biology. They grow slowly, reaching maturity only after about 20 years. They give birth to live young, with females carrying eggs internally for an extremely long gestation period, possibly up to 5 years, one of the longest of any vertebrate. They can live to be 60, possibly even 100 years old. Their genes tell an equally fascinating story. When scientists sequenced the coelacanth genome, they discovered that these fish evolve incredibly slowly. Their DNA changes at a fraction of the rate seen in other vertebrates. It's as though time moves differently for coelacanths, their evolution occurring in slow motion compared to the frenetic pace of change in other species. This slow evolution might be key to their survival. In the stable, unchanging environment of the deep sea, there was no pressure to adapt quickly. The darkness, the cold, the consistent availability of prey, all these factors remained constant over millions of years. The coelacanth had found its niche, its perfect refuge from a changing world, and it simply stayed there, generation after generation, while overhead the continents drifted, ice ages came and went, and species rose and fell in the sunlit shallows. But the coelacanth's story, remarkable as it is, was only the beginning, because the deep ocean, it turned out, was full of ghosts. In November 1976, nearly 40 years after the coelacanth's rediscovery, another impossible creature emerged from the depths. This time, the location was the waters off Hawaii, and the discoverers were the crew of a US Navy ship. The vessel was conducting research about 25 miles northeast of Oahu, deploying and retrieving a parachute sea anchor designed to keep the ship stable. When they hauled up the anchor from a depth of around 540 feet, something massive and strange was tangled in the lines. It was a shark, but like no shark anyone had ever seen. The creature was enormous, nearly 15 feet long and weighing over 1,600 pounds. But its size wasn't what made it extraordinary. It was the shape. The shark had a huge, bulbous head, a massive, gaping mouth that seemed far too large for its body, and a soft, flabby body that looked almost rubbery. Inside that cavernous mouth were hundreds of tiny, hooked teeth, and its lips were silvery and reflective. The crew brought it aboard, stunned by its appearance. The shark died shortly after surfacing, likely from the rapid pressure change, but scientists were able to examine it before decomposition set in, and what they found left them baffled. This shark didn't fit into any known family. It had characteristics of several different shark groups but matched none of them completely. Its enormous mouth, lined with photophores that could produce light, suggested it was a filter feeder, like whale sharks or basking sharks. But its anatomy, its teeth, its body structure, all were unique. Marine biologist Leighton Taylor led the examination, and after careful study, he reached a stunning conclusion. This was not just a new species, but an entirely new family of shark. He named it Megachasma pelagios, meaning great yawning mouth of the open sea. The common name, megamouth shark, fit even better. The discovery of the megamouth was as significant as finding the coelacanth, perhaps more so. While coelacanths had at least been known from fossils, giving scientists some framework for understanding them, the megamouth was completely unprecedented. Nothing in the fossil record had prepared anyone for its existence. And yet, as researchers dug deeper into the paleontological literature, they found clues. Ancient shark teeth discovered decades earlier in California, small and oddly shaped, had puzzled paleontologists. The teeth didn't match any known shark species, and without a complete specimen, scientists couldn't determine what kind of shark they belonged to. Now, looking at the megamouth's teeth, the connection became clear. Those mysterious fossils were from ancient megamouths, ancestors that had swum in the seas 23 million years ago. The modern species represented a lineage that had survived, largely unchanged, from the Oligocene epoch through ice ages and mass extinctions, hiding in the depths where no one thought to look. Since that first discovery in 1976, only about 300 megamouth sharks have been observed or caught worldwide. That's fewer than one confirmed sighting every 2 months across the entire ocean for nearly 50 years. They remain among the rarest large animals on Earth. What scientists have learned from these rare encounters paints a picture of a creature supremely adapted to deep-sea life. Megamouths are filter feeders, swimming slowly through the water with their enormous mouths open, filtering out krill, jellyfish, and other small prey. Unlike the active hunters that dominate shark evolution, megamouths are passive, almost lazy in their feeding strategy. They undertake massive vertical migrations each day, one of the most extreme behaviors documented in sharks. During daylight hours, megamouths descend to depths of 1,500 feet or more, hovering in the darkness. As night falls, they rise toward the surface, following the vertical migration of the deep scattering layer, that massive daily movement of zooplankton, and small animals that forms one of the largest migrations on Earth by sheer biomass. This behavior has made them almost impossible to study. They spend their days in the deep, beyond the reach of casual observation, and their nights feeding in the open ocean, where encountering them is a matter of pure chance. Most megamouth sightings have been accidental, the result of the sharks becoming entangled in fishing nets or washing ashore after death. The few living megamouths that have been tracked with tags revealed more surprises. One shark, tracked off California, dove as deep as 3,000 feet during the day, then rose to within 40 feet of the surface at night. Another, tagged off Japan, showed similar patterns but also demonstrated unexpected social behavior, swimming alongside another megamouth for several hours. That observation, rare and brief, hinted that megamouths might not be the solitary creatures scientists assumed. Perhaps they gather in small groups in the deep, coordinating their movements, maybe even cooperating in ways we don't yet understand. But with so few observations, such behavior remains speculative, another mystery layered atop the already mysterious. The megamouth's body tells its own story of deep-sea adaptation. Unlike the muscular, streamlined bodies of most sharks, the megamouth is soft and flabby, its skeleton poorly calcified. This reduces its density, making it neutrally buoyant at depth, requiring less energy to maintain position in the water column. Its huge liver, filled with low-density oils, provides additional buoyancy. These adaptations suggest a creature that has surrendered the high-speed, predatory lifestyle of its ancestors for a more energy-efficient existence. In the deep sea, where food can be scarce and hunting energy expensive, the megamouth's slow, plodding, filter-feeding strategy makes perfect sense. It's not an apex predator. It's a gentle giant, drifting through the darkness, mouth agape, content to catch whatever small morsels drift inside. Recent genetic studies of the few megamouth tissue samples available have revealed that this shark sits at a crucial point in shark evolution. It represents one of the most primitive living members of the order Lamniformes, the group that includes mako sharks, great white sharks, and basking sharks. But megamouths branched off early, before these other lineages evolved their specialized hunting adaptations. In essence, the megamouth shows us what ancestral lamniform sharks might have looked like before evolution drove them toward either fierce predation or specialized filter feeding. It's a window into shark evolution, a living branch that split off early and remained largely unchanged while its relatives diversified into the hunters we know today. And like the coelacanth, the megamouth has survived by finding a refuge, a stable niche in the deep ocean where competition was low, conditions remained constant, and the imperative to change simply never arose. But even the coelacanth and megamouth don't exhaust the list of supposedly extinct creatures living in the deep. The ocean, it turns out, is full of such survivors. Consider the frilled shark, a creature so primitive it looks like something from the age of dinosaurs. With its eel-like body, 6 pairs of frilly gill slits, and rows of backward-pointing teeth, the frilled shark resembles no modern fish. It looks, quite literally, prehistoric. And it is. Frilled sharks belong to a lineage that dates back at least 80 million years, with remarkably little change. They hunt in the deep, their flexible bodies allowing them to strike at prey with a snake-like lunge. They give birth to live young after an extraordinarily long gestation period, possibly up to 3.5 years, the longest of any vertebrate. Frilled sharks were known from fossils long before a living specimen was caught, and even now, encounters remain rare. They typically live between 1,500 and 3,000 feet down, occasionally venturing deeper or shallower. Like the coelacanth, they represent an ancient lineage that found a way to persist unchanged in the deep ocean's stability. Then there's the goblin shark, another deep-sea ghost with a lineage stretching back 125 million years. Its elongated snout, protrusible jaws, and soft pinkish body make it look alien, almost sculptural. The goblin shark belongs to the family Mitsukurinidae, and it's the only living member of that family. All its relatives are extinct, known only from fossils. Goblin sharks live at depths ranging from 300 feet to over 4,000 feet, scattered across the world's oceans in isolated populations. They're slow swimmers, drifting through the darkness, detecting prey with electroreceptors in their elongated snouts. When prey comes close, the jaws shoot forward, extending outward in a lightning-fast strike that impales the victim on needle-like teeth. Only a few dozen goblin sharks have ever been caught or observed, making them even rarer in human experience than megamouths. Each encounter adds tiny fragments to our understanding, but the goblin shark remains largely mysterious, a pink ghost haunting depths where humans rarely venture. Not all living fossils are fish. Some belong to even more ancient lineages. The chambered nautilus, with its beautiful spiral shell and tentacled body, represents a group that has existed for over 500 million years. Nautiloids were among the first predators in the ancient seas, and they dominated oceanic ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. Today, only a handful of nautilus species survive, all living in the Indo-Pacific region at depths typically between 600 and 2,000 feet during the day, rising to shallower waters at night to feed. Their shells, built according to the mathematical precision of the Fibonacci sequence, house complex animals with sophisticated eyes, multiple tentacles, and a jet propulsion system that predates the evolution of fish. Nautiluses live slowly, reaching maturity only after about 15 years, and potentially living for decades. They reproduce infrequently, making them vulnerable to overfishing for their shells, but they've survived far worse than human predation. They lived through every major mass extinction event in Earth's history, persisting through catastrophes that wiped out most other marine life. Even creatures we consider relatively common carry ancient lineages in their genes. Horseshoe crabs, those armored arthropods that wash up on beaches during spawning season, have existed virtually unchanged for 445 million years. They're not even crabs, but chelicerates, more closely related to spiders and scorpions than to true crustaceans. 4 species survive today, scattered across coastal regions in the Atlantic and Pacific. During breeding season, they emerge from deeper waters to lay their eggs on beaches, just as their ancestors did before the first fish crawled onto land. Their blue blood, containing copper-based hemocyanin rather than iron-based hemoglobin, is harvested by the medical industry to test for bacterial contamination, a use that wouldn't have surprised their ancient kin. Brachiopods, or lampshells, present another case of extraordinary persistence. These small, shell-bearing creatures superficially resemble clams, but they're not mollusks at all. They represent one of the most ancient animal phyla, having first appeared over 500 million years ago in the Cambrian period. During the Paleozoic era, brachiopods dominated the ocean floor, with thousands of species filling ecological niches across all marine environments. But the end Permian extinction, the worst mass extinction in Earth's history, devastated them. 95% of brachiopod species disappeared, yet some survived. Today, about 400 species still exist, mostly in deep waters. They're far less common than their dominant past would suggest, relegated to isolated populations in cold, deep environments where competition from other organisms is minimal. But they persist, tiny echoes of an ancient world when they were among the most successful animals in the sea. The deep ocean has preserved these creatures, and countless others, because it offers something that shallow waters, forests, and terrestrial environments cannot: stability. Understanding this requires us to think about what makes a refugium, a refuge not just from predators or weather, but from the relentless pressure of evolution itself. A refugium, in ecological and evolutionary terms, is a habitat that remains relatively unchanged even as the surrounding world transforms. It's an isolated pocket of stability in a dynamic, changing biosphere, a place where species can persist unchanged because the environmental pressures that drive adaptation elsewhere simply don't apply. The deep ocean is, in many ways, the ultimate refugium. To understand why, we need to appreciate just how different the deep sea is from the environments most of us are familiar with. First, there's the darkness. Sunlight penetrates seawater to a depth of only about 650 feet, and that's in the clearest oceanic waters. Below that lies the twilight zone, where dim light still filters down but photosynthesis becomes impossible. By 3,300 feet, no sunlight penetrates at all. The water is utterly, completely black. This absence of light means no plants, no seaweed forests swaying in the current, no kelp anchoring complex ecosystems, no photosynthesizing algae forming the base of food webs. The deep sea runs on a different economy, one based on detritus, the slow rain of organic matter falling from the sunlit surface world. Dead organisms, fecal matter, bits of organic material, all this forms what scientists call marine snow, a constant gentle snowfall of nutrients drifting down from above. Deep-sea creatures feed on this snow directly, or they feed on each other, or they hunt the animals that rise from the depths each night to feed near the surface. This economy is stable. The rain of marine snow has fallen for hundreds of millions of years. It doesn't stop in winter, doesn't dry up in drought, doesn't flood in storms. It's constant, reliable, unchanging. And that constancy creates an environment where evolution's usual pressures ease. Then there's the cold. Deep ocean temperatures hover just above freezing in most regions, typically between 35 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit. This isn't seasonal cold that varies with the sun's angle or the flow of currents. It's constant, year-round, century after century cold that has remained the same for millions of years. Cold water affects life in profound ways. Metabolisms slow, chemical reactions proceed more gradually, growth rates decrease. Many deep-sea fish grow incredibly slowly, taking decades to reach maturity. Some deep-sea organisms might live for hundreds of years, though confirming such extreme longevity remains challenging. This slow pace of life means slower reproduction, which in turn means slower evolution. Genetic changes occur through reproduction, and if generations are long and reproductive rates low, evolution proceeds at a crawl. For creatures in stable environments with no pressure to change, this slow pace poses no problem. The pressure itself is another defining feature. At 3,300 feet, the pressure is 100 times greater than at the surface. At 20,000 feet, it's 600 times greater. This crushing pressure shapes everything about deep-sea life, from the structure of cell membranes to the composition of proteins. But here's what matters for our story. This pressure has been constant for as long as the deep ocean has existed. It doesn't vary, doesn't fluctuate with seasons or weather. An organism adapted to live at 3,000 feet experiences the same pressure its ancestors experienced 1 million years ago, 10 million years ago, even 100 million years ago. Add darkness, cold, and pressure together, and you have an environment that's been essentially unchanged since shortly after the oceans formed. While shallow seas rose and fell, froze and warmed, while continents drifted and climates shifted, the deep ocean remained constant, a vast, dark, cold realm where time moves differently. This stability explains why so many living fossils inhabit the deep. In shallow waters, environmental changes drive evolution. Ice ages bring cold water and new predators. Warm periods bring different species, different prey, different competition. Sea levels rise and fall, exposing and flooding coastlines. Storms churn the water. Seasons bring light and darkness, warmth and cold. Each change creates pressure to adapt. Predators become faster, so prey must become faster or develop new defenses. Food sources shift, so diets must change. New competitors arrive, so niches must be redefined. Evolution never stops because the environment never stops changing. But in the deep sea, these pressures diminish or disappear entirely. There are no seasons. Storms don't penetrate to depth. Ice ages barely affect the deep ocean's temperature. The food supply, though meager, remains consistent. And crucially, there are fewer species competing for resources. Biodiversity in the deep sea is different from shallow waters. While the deep hosts many species, especially of smaller organisms, the density of life is much lower. Food is scarce, populations are spread thin, and competitive interactions are less intense than in the crowded ecosystems of coral reefs or coastal zones. This lower competition means less pressure for aggressive adaptation. A predator doesn't need to become dramatically faster when its prey has nowhere to hide and no competitors to drive efficiency. A prey species doesn't need radical defenses when predators are sparse and encounters infrequent. The result is evolutionary stasis, not because these creatures can't evolve, but because they don't need to. Their environments solve stability, and they solved their environments long ago. The coelacanth's body plan worked 100 million years ago, and it still works today because the deep water caves it inhabits haven't fundamentally changed. But refugia don't exist in perfect isolation. The deep sea connects to the surface world through those vertical migrations we mentioned earlier, through occasional incursions of shallow water species, and through the ever-present rain of organic matter from above. These connections can be crucial during mass extinction events. When catastrophe strikes the surface world, when asteroids impact or volcanic eruptions darken the sky, or climate swings wildly, shallow water species often go extinct. Their environments change too rapidly for adaptation. Food webs collapse, ecosystems unravel, but the deep ocean, buffered by miles of water, experiences these catastrophes less directly. The rain of organic matter might diminish temporarily, but it doesn't stop. Temperatures might shift slightly, but not drastically, and crucially, the deep provides a place where survivors can retreat. Consider the end Cretaceous extinction, the asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The impact created a global catastrophe. Debris launched into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, causing temperatures to plummet. Photosynthesis stopped or slowed dramatically. On land and in shallow seas, food webs collapsed. But in the deep ocean, life continued, not unchanged, not without impact, but with far less disruption than in the surface world. The rain of organic matter decreased, certainly, as shallow water productivity dropped, but it didn't stop entirely, and deep-sea organisms, already adapted to scarce food and darkness, weathered the crisis. Some shallow water species may have survived by moving deeper, descending into the twilight zone or beyond to escape the worst of the extinction event. When conditions improved and the surface world recovered, these survivors could recolonize shallow waters, carrying genetic lineages that might otherwise have gone extinct. The coelacanth's survival through this extinction event suggests exactly this kind of refugial persistence. In the fossil record, coelacanths disappear from shallow water deposits after the Cretaceous. Scientists interpreted this as extinction, but more likely, they simply moved deeper, or their populations contracted to deep water refugia where fossilization was less likely. For 66 million years, they lived in the deep, invisible to the fossil record, while above them, the world transformed. Mammals diversified into countless new forms, birds evolved from surviving dinosaurs, flowering plants spread across the continents, and in the ocean, modern teleost fishes, the group that includes most fish species today, exploded in diversity, filling niches left vacant by the extinction. But in the deep caves off the African coast, in the stable, unchanging waters of the Indian Ocean depths, coelacanths continued as they always had, generation after generation, largely unchanged, waiting 66 million years to surprise a museum curator in 1938. This pattern repeats across deep-sea living fossils. The megamouth's fossil record is sparse, suggesting it too retreated to deep waters at some point in its history. The frilled shark, the goblin shark, the numerous ancient fish families that still swim in the abyss, all likely survived extinction events by inhabiting depths that buffered them from surface catastrophes. But refugia aren't perfect shields. Some deep-sea organisms did go extinct during past mass extinctions, particularly during events that affected ocean chemistry globally. The Permian extinction, for instance, appears to have caused widespread ocean anoxia, the depletion of dissolved oxygen, even at depth. This may have killed many deep-sea species along with their shallow water relatives. And modern changes threaten deep-sea refugia in new ways. Climate change is beginning to affect deep ocean temperatures, slowly but measurably. Ocean acidification, caused by increased atmospheric carbon dioxide dissolving in seawater, affects the entire water column, including the depths. And most immediately threatening, deep-sea fishing has expanded dramatically in recent decades. Species that survived for hundreds of millions of years in the stable darkness of the deep are now being caught in nets, their populations reduced by fishing pressure they never evolved to handle. The coelacanth's critically endangered status stems partly from bycatch in deep-sea gill nets. Other ancient lineages face similar threats. The deep ocean protected these creatures from extinction for geological ages, but it cannot protect them from modern technology and human impacts. And that raises a profound question. If we lose these living fossils now, after they survived every other crisis Earth could throw at them, what does that say about us? Before we consider that question, we need to understand more about how these creatures have remained so unchanged, about what evolutionary stasis really means, and about what studying living fossils tells us about evolution itself. The coelacanth's genome was sequenced in 2013, and the results astonished geneticists. The fish's DNA was evolving, but at an extraordinarily slow rate, roughly 3 times slower than in most other vertebrates. This slow evolution isn't unique to coelacanths. The elephant shark, a deep-sea cartilaginous fish related to sharks and rays, holds the record for the slowest evolving genome of any vertebrate. Its DNA changes so slowly that it's been called a molecular living fossil, its genetic code almost imperceptibly altered over hundreds of millions of years. At first glance, this seems to contradict everything we know about evolution. The theory of evolution tells us that populations change over time as mutations occur, natural selection acts on those mutations, and beneficial traits become more common while harmful ones disappear. Over millions of years, these small changes accumulate into large-scale transformations, driving the diversification of life. But here we have species that have barely changed in hundreds of millions of years. Their evolution seems to have stopped, or at least slowed to a glacial pace. How is this possible? And what does it tell us about the nature of evolution itself? The answer lies in understanding what drives evolutionary change. Evolution isn't a force that pushes species to become more complex, or better adapted in some absolute sense. It's a response to environmental challenges. When environments change, populations must adapt or die. But when environments remain stable, the pressure for change decreases. Natural selection still operates, but it becomes conservative. Mutations that significantly alter a well-adapted organism are likely to be harmful, not beneficial. An organism that's perfectly suited to its environment doesn't need innovation, it needs consistency. The genes that have worked for millions of years are the genes that should continue working. This creates a kind of evolutionary inertia. In stable environments, selection acts primarily to preserve existing adaptations rather than create new ones. Mutations still occur at the usual rate. Mutations are driven by chemical errors during DNA replication, and these errors happen regardless of environment. But natural selection filters out most of these mutations because they're not improvements. The result is an organism whose genome changes very slowly, not because mutation rates are low, though in some cases they might be slightly lower than average, but because selection eliminates most changes before they can spread through the population. This explains the coelacanth's slow genetic evolution. Living in stable, deep-water environments, the fish's body plan and physiology worked perfectly well. There was no pressure for speed, no need for specialized hunting adaptations, no requirement for color changes or camouflage innovations. The basic coelacanth design, refined over millions of years before retreating to the deep, simply kept working. But slow genetic evolution doesn't mean no evolution at all. Even living fossils change. The modern coelacanth is not identical to its Cretaceous ancestors, though the differences are subtle. Its fins have shifted slightly in position. Some of its internal organs have modified. its reproductive strategy may have changed. These are small adaptations, fine-tuning rather than major redesign, but they demonstrate that evolution never truly stops. Similarly, megamouth sharks aren't identical to their Oligocene ancestors. The fossil species, Megachasma applegate, had slightly different teeth and was possibly larger than the modern species. These differences suggest evolutionary change occurred, but at a very slow rate, and mostly in minor features rather than fundamental body plans. This distinction matters. When we call something a living fossil, we don't mean it's literally unchanged at the genetic or even anatomical level. We mean it's remarkably similar to its ancient relatives, changing far more slowly than most lineages. It's retained a body plan and lifestyle that would be recognizable to a paleontologist looking at fossils from tens or hundreds of millions of years ago. Living fossils also teach us about evolutionary constraints. Not every trait can change independently. Body plans are integrated systems where altering one feature often requires changing many others. The coelacanth's lobed fins, for instance, are connected to a specific skeletal structure, muscle arrangement, and neural control system. Changing the fins would require coordinated changes across all these systems. Such coordinated changes are difficult to achieve through gradual evolution. Random mutations are unlikely to alter multiple systems simultaneously in beneficial ways. So once an integrated body plan evolves, it tends to persist, even if individual features could theoretically be improved. This may explain why so many living fossils retain ancient body plans. It's not that these designs are optimal in some absolute sense, just that they're good enough for their environments, and changing them would require overcoming significant evolutionary barriers. Deep-sea environments might also reduce mutation rates directly. The cold temperatures slow metabolic processes, which could reduce the rate of DNA replication errors. Lower metabolic rates mean less oxidative stress, potentially reducing DNA damage from free radicals, and the absence of UV radiation in the deep eliminates a major source of mutations that affect shallow water organisms. These factors probably contribute to slower evolution, though their effects are likely modest compared to the stabilizing selection imposed by unchanging environments. There's also the question of generation time. Many deep-sea living fossils grow slowly and reproduce late in life. The coelacanth doesn't reach sexual maturity until around age 20 and may live to be 100. This long generation time means fewer opportunities for mutations to occur and spread. Evolution proceeds per generation, not per year, so longer-lived species evolve more slowly in absolute time. But again, this alone doesn't explain the extraordinary stasis we see in living fossils. Elephants and whales have long generation times but evolve at normal or even fast rates when environmental pressures demand it. The key factor remains environmental stability, allowing existing adaptations to persist. Interestingly, not all of a living fossil's genome evolves slowly. Studies of coelacanths found that while genes coding for basic body structure and physiology change very slowly, genes involved in immune function and smell evolve at more normal rates. This makes sense. The basic body plan doesn't need to change in a stable environment, but immune systems must adapt to evolving pathogens, and olfactory systems benefit from fine-tuning to detect specific prey chemicals. This mosaic pattern of evolution, some genes changing rapidly while others remain static, appears to be common in living fossils. It suggests that even in the most stable environments, some evolutionary pressures never disappear. Diseases evolve, prey species shift their chemical signals slightly, and survival requires continuous adaptation in these specific areas, even if gross anatomy remains unchanged. Living fossils also reveal something about the nature of evolutionary innovation. The most dramatic evolutionary changes, the ones that create fundamentally new body plans or ecological strategies, often occur rapidly in geological time, sometimes in bursts lasting only a few million years. These periods of rapid change are typically associated with environmental upheaval, extinction events that clear ecological niches, or the colonization of new environments. Between these bursts, Evolution settles into slower pace, fine-tuning existing adaptations rather than creating radical innovations. Living fossils represent lineages that found successful designs early, survived subsequent upheavals by retreating to stable refugia, and haven't encountered the specific combination of environmental change and ecological opportunity that would drive major innovation. They're not evolutionary failures or dead ends. They're success stories, designs so good that they've worked for hundreds of millions of years. In a sense, they've achieved what every species aspires to, a perfect fit with their environment that requires no further modification. But this success carries a hidden vulnerability. Organisms adapted to extreme stability may lose the flexibility to handle change. Living fossils often have small populations, limited geographic ranges, and low genetic diversity, all factors that reduce resilience when environments do shift. This is why so many living fossils are now endangered. The very traits that allowed them to survive for so long, their specialization for stable deep-sea environments, their slow reproduction and growth, their small populations, make them vulnerable to rapid modern changes. They survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, but they're struggling with industrial fishing and climate change. And that brings us to the mass extinctions that have punctuated Earth's history, the catastrophic events that reshaped life on our planet, and the curious fact that some lineages survived while others perished. Earth has experienced at least 5 major mass extinction events, periods when more than 75% of species disappeared in a relatively short time. These extinctions reset the evolutionary clock, eliminating dominant groups and allowing survivors to diversify into newly vacant ecological niches. The most famous is the End Cretaceous extinction 66 million years ago, the asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs' reign. But it wasn't the most severe. That distinction belongs to the End Permian extinction 252 million years ago, often called the Great Dying. Over 95% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species went extinct. Life came closer to total annihilation than at any other point in its history. Other major extinctions include the End Ordovician 444 million years ago, the Late Devonian 375 million years ago, and the End Triassic 201 million years ago. Each event had different causes, from volcanic eruptions to glaciation to possible asteroid impacts, but all shared one thing: they dramatically reduced biodiversity and altered the course of evolution. And through all of them, some lineages survived. The question that has fascinated scientists for decades is, why? What allowed certain species to endure when so many others perished? Living fossils provide clues. Many of them survived multiple extinction events. Horseshoe crabs have lived through all 5 major mass extinctions. Coelacanths survived at least 2. Nautiluses endured them all, despite belonging to a group, the cephalopods, that was heavily impacted by most extinction events. One factor is clearly refugia. As we've discussed, the deep ocean provides a buffer against surface catastrophes. When the End Cretaceous asteroid struck, it triggered massive immediate effects: impact debris, wildfires, atmospheric shock waves that devastated surface environments. The subsequent impact winter, caused by debris blocking sunlight, further devastated ecosystems that depended on photosynthesis. But the deep ocean experienced these effects only indirectly. The reign of organic matter decreased as surface productivity dropped, but it didn't stop entirely. Deep-sea organisms, already adapted to food scarcity, could survive on reduced rations, and the darkness they lived in wasn't made worse by atmospheric debris blocking sunlight, because sunlight never reached them anyway. Refugia existed in other environments too. During the End Permian extinction, which appears to have been driven by massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, some organisms survived in lakes, others in high-altitude regions, still others in the deep sea or in polar areas, less affected by the warming and acidification that killed equatorial life. The key is that refugia provide isolation from the extinction mechanism. If an extinction event is caused by darkness from atmospheric debris, organisms that don't depend on light can survive. If it's caused by warming, cold-adapted organisms in cool refugia persist. If it's caused by ocean acidification, species in freshwater or deep-sea alkaline environments may endure. But refugia alone don't explain survival. Many species living in refugia still went extinct. So what else mattered? Generalist strategies helped. Species that could eat many different foods, tolerate a range of temperatures, and occupy various habitats had better survival odds than specialists dependent on specific resources or conditions. The horseshoe crab, for instance, can survive in a range of salinities and temperatures, feeding on various organisms. This flexibility allowed it to persist as specialized species died around it. Ironically, some living fossils survived despite being specialists. Coelacanths are specialized deep-sea predators with specific habitat requirements. Megamouths are highly specialized filter feeders, yet both survived. This suggests that being a specialist isn't necessarily a death sentence in mass extinctions, as long as your specialty involves resources or conditions that persist through the crisis. Population structure also mattered. Species with widespread populations distributed across many regions had better odds of survival than species concentrated in single areas. Even if most populations died, a few in particularly favorable locations might persist. These survivors could then recolonize vacant habitats once conditions improved. Reproductive strategies played a role too. Species that reproduced quickly and in large numbers could rebound from population crashes more easily than slow breeding specialists. But again, the pattern isn't absolute. Coelacanths reproduce very slowly, with long gestation periods and few offspring, yet they survived extinction events that killed faster breeding species. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth about mass extinctions. Luck matters. Not every survival can be explained by adaptive advantages or strategic refugia. Sometimes species survive simply because they happened to be in the right place at the right time, or because random chance meant their populations persisted when similar species died. This randomness is one reason why living fossils are so precious for science. They're not necessarily the best species or the most adaptable. They're survivors of a combination of advantages, refugia, and luck that allowed them to persist through multiple crises. Each one represents a different solution to the problem of survival, and studying them reveals the many pathways life can take to endure catastrophe. Recent research has also revealed that extinction events may have promoted deep-sea colonization in some groups. The deep allopatry hypothesis suggests that oceanic crises, like the oxygen-depleted events that occurred during the Cretaceous, may have isolated populations in scattered deep-sea refugia that retained adequate oxygen. These isolated populations, cut off from each other, could then evolve separately, leading to speciation. When conditions improved, these new species might recolonize shallow waters, or some might remain in the deep, adapted to their refugial habitat. This process could explain why we find so many ancient lineages in deep waters. They may have been driven there by extinction events, found the deep suitable, and simply stayed. Their surface-dwelling relatives went extinct, but the deep-sea populations persisted, becoming the living fossils we find today. It's also possible that deep-sea environments act as evolutionary dead ends for some lineages. A species that retreats to the deep during a crisis might survive, but its adaptations to deep-sea life, slow reproduction, low population density, specialized feeding make it difficult to recolonize shallow waters even when conditions improve. So it remains in the deep, effectively trapped by its own adaptations. This could explain why living fossils often exist in low numbers and restricted ranges. They're survivors of past crises, but their survival strategy involves specialization for stable refugia that limits their ability to expand when opportunities arise. The fossil record supports this interpretation. Many ancient lineages show patterns of high diversity in the past, followed by dramatic decline, with only a few species persisting to the present day. These surviving species are often deep-sea specialists, suggesting that deep-sea refugia acted as the final retreat for groups that couldn't compete in the changed post-extinction world. But not all deep-sea living fossils are relics of past diversity. Some may represent successful designs that found their optimal niche in the deep and simply stayed there, changing little because their environment required no change. The distinction between refuge and optimal habitat can be subtle and probably varies between species. What's clear is that the deep ocean has played a crucial role in preserving biodiversity through Earth's most catastrophic moments. It's been both a shelter during storms and a long-term haven for lineages that found their place in the darkness. Understanding this role helps us appreciate why losing deep-sea biodiversity to modern impacts would be an irreplaceable loss. These creatures didn't just survive extinction events, they survived as witnesses to Earth's entire post-Cambrian history, carrying in their genes and body plans information about evolution, adaptation, and persistence that we're only beginning to decode. And we're decoding it using technologies that would have seemed like science fiction just decades ago. Technologies that finally allow us to explore the deep sea that has sheltered these creatures for so long. Until recently, studying deep-sea living fossils meant examining dead specimens caught by accident. Scientists could analyze anatomy, dissect internal organs, and study bones, scales, and teeth. But they couldn't observe behavior, couldn't see these creatures in their natural habitats, couldn't watch how they moved, hunted, or interacted with their environment. That changed with the development of deep-sea exploration technology. Submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and advanced camera systems have opened the deep ocean to direct observation for the first time in human history. The first major breakthrough came in the 1,960 seconds with the development of manned submersibles capable of reaching great depths. Alvin, launched in 1964, could dive to nearly 15,000 feet, allowing scientists to visit parts of the ocean previously known only through indirect sampling. Later, submersibles pushed even deeper, with vessels like Japan's Shinkai 6500 capable of reaching 21,000 feet. These vehicles revolutionized deep-sea research. For the first time, humans could see the deep ocean with their own eyes, observing its strange fauna in situ rather than hauling dead specimens to the surface. But manned submersibles are expensive to operate and can only visit limited areas. The real transformation came with ROVs and autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs. These robotic systems, controlled remotely or operating independently, can spend hours or days exploring the deep, filming continuously, collecting samples, and covering far more territory than manned vehicles. Modern ROVs carry high-definition cameras, lights, manipulator arms, and various sensors. They can hover in place, move precisely around delicate organisms, and operate in environments too dangerous or remote for manned vessels. Some can dive to the deepest parts of the ocean, over 36,000 feet in the Mariana Trench. These technologies have captured astonishing footage. In 2000, a team used a submersible to film living coelacanths in their natural habitat for the first time. The footage showed coelacanths doing something no one had seen before, swimming upside down, drifting in caves, using their unique lobed fins to perform a strange headstand behavior that seemed to help them maintain position in currents. This discovery would have been impossible from examining dead specimens. It revealed aspects of coelacanth biology that weren't apparent from anatomy alone, showing how the ancient fish's unusual body plan translated into real-world behavior. Later expeditions captured more footage, revealing that coelacanths sometimes hunt cooperatively, that they may establish territories in cave systems, and that their populations are structured around specific geological features, like underwater lava flows. Each observation added layers of understanding to the fish that had been known from a single dead specimen for 14 years. Megamouth sharks have been even harder to observe. Only a handful of encounters have been filmed, and detailed behavioral footage essentially doesn't exist. In 1990, researchers managed to track a megamouth off California using a radio tag, collecting data on its vertical migrations and feeding patterns. But actually filming one feeding or interacting with others or displaying any of the behaviors that define its lifestyle remains an elusive goal. Part of the challenge is that megamouths, like many deep-sea creatures, are scattered across vast areas. The deep ocean is enormous, covering more than 50% of Earth's surface, and most of it has never been explored even once. The chance of an ROV encountering a rare shark in this vastness is vanishingly small. Baited cameras have helped. Researchers deploy cameras with bait attached, leaving them on the seafloor for hours or days to film whatever creatures arrive to feed. These systems have captured footage of numerous deep-sea species, including frilled sharks, goblin sharks, and other rare creatures. But baited cameras have limitations. They only show feeding behavior, and only of species attracted to bait. Passive filter feeders like megamouths wouldn't come to bait. Territorial species like coelacanths might not either. So while baited cameras have revealed much about deep-sea scavengers and predators, they miss many of the most interesting living fossils. Environmental DNA, or eDNA, represents another breakthrough. Organisms constantly shed DNA into their environment through skin cells, scales, waste products, and other means. By collecting water samples and analyzing the DNA they contain, researchers can detect species presence without ever seeing the organisms themselves. eDNA surveys have revealed that some living fossils are more widely distributed than specimen collection suggested. Coelacanths, for instance, may inhabit more locations than the few known populations, but their rarity and deep habitat make direct observation difficult. eDNA provides evidence of their presence, guiding future search efforts. Advances in genetic sequencing have also transformed living fossil research. Until recently, studying evolution meant comparing physical traits across fossils and living species. Now, researchers can sequence entire genomes, comparing DNA directly and reconstructing evolutionary relationships with unprecedented precision. The Coelacanth Genome Project revealed that genetic changes had been minimal over millions of years, but it also showed that different genes evolve at different rates and that even living fossils continue evolving in certain systems. The Elephant Shark Genome Project confirmed it as the slowest evolving vertebrate genome known, providing insights into early vertebrate evolution. These genetic studies sometimes surprise researchers. When megamouth shark tissue finally became available for genetic analysis, the results showed that megamouths are more primitive than scientists expected, representing an early branch in shark evolution that split off before modern lamniform sharks diversified. This revised scientists' understanding of shark evolutionary history. Genetic studies have also helped identify new species. The Indonesian coelacanth, discovered in 1997, was initially thought to be the same species as the African coelacanth, but genetic analysis showed significant differences, indicating they'd been separated for millions of years and had evolved into distinct species. This discovery doubled the number of known living coelacanth species and raised the possibility that others might exist in unexplored deep waters elsewhere. Deep-sea exploration has also revealed that extinct species sometimes aren't extinct at all, they're just very good at hiding. In recent years, several fish species known only from fossils have been found alive, joining the ranks of living fossils. These discoveries underscore how little we know about deep-sea biodiversity. Modern estimates suggest that we've explored less than 20% of the ocean floor in any detail, and the vast majority of deep-sea species remain undiscovered. Every expedition finds new species, new behaviors, new ecosystems that challenge our assumptions about marine life. Some of these discoveries involve creatures we didn't know existed at all. Others involve finding populations of known species in unexpected places. And some involve recognizing that organisms we thought were different are actually the same species in different life stages or showing different morphologies. The deep sea keeps its secrets well. Darkness, pressure, and vastness combine to create an environment that's harder to explore than the surface of Mars. We have better maps of Mars than of our own ocean floor. We've sent more missions to space than to the deepest parts of our oceans. And in that vast, unexplored realm, living fossils continue their ancient lives, largely unaware that the world above has changed in ways they could never imagine. Every new technology, every improved camera, every longer-lasting battery for submersibles brings us closer to understanding these creatures, but it also reveals how much we still don't know. Each answer raises new questions. Each observation shows behaviors we didn't predict, and the deep sea, patient and dark, continues to hold mysteries we've barely begun to uncover. Perhaps the most profound mystery is what living fossils tell us, not about the past, but about evolution itself, about the nature of change and stability, about what it means for a lineage to succeed, and about our own place in the grand sweep of life on Earth. When Charles Darwin developed his theory of evolution by natural selection, he emphasized that evolution is an ongoing process driven by environmental change. Species adapt or go extinct. Those that survive pass their traits to offspring. Over time, populations change and new species emerge. But Darwin also recognized that some organisms seem to change very little. In On the Origin of Species, he wrote about living fossils, organisms that had persisted largely unchanged, while their relatives diversified or went extinct. He attributed their stasis to occupying isolated niches, protected from competition and environmental change. Modern evolutionary theory has refined this understanding, but Darwin's basic insight remains correct. Living fossils exist in stable environments where the pressure for change is minimal. They're not evolutionary failures. They're success stories of a different kind than the rapidly diversifying lineages that typically capture scientific attention. But living fossils teach us more than just that stasis is possible. They reveal important truths about how evolution actually works, truths that aren't always apparent from studying rapidly evolving lineages. First, they show that evolutionary change is not inevitable. Popular understanding often portrays evolution as a progressive force, pushing organisms toward greater complexity or better adaptation. But evolution has no direction or goal. It's simply a response to environmental challenges. In stable environments, the most successful strategy is often to not change. This principle has implications beyond biology. It suggests that stability, when conditions permit, is a valid evolutionary strategy. Change for change's sake provides no advantage. Only change in response to actual environmental pressure improves fitness. Second, living fossils demonstrate that successful designs can persist across geological time. The coelacanth's body plan, the nautilus's shell, the horseshoe crab's armor, these designs have worked for hundreds of millions of years because they solve fundamental problems efficiently. They're not the only solutions to these problems, but they're good solutions. And in stable environments, good enough is genuinely enough. This challenges the notion that evolution must constantly produce novel solutions. Sometimes the old solutions remain best, and evolution's role becomes preserving these solutions rather than creating new ones. Third, living fossils reveal the importance of mosaic evolution, the fact that different traits within the same organism can evolve at different rates. Coelacanths have stable body plans, but evolving immune systems. Their basic anatomy changes slowly, but their genes for fighting disease change quickly, tracking the evolution of pathogens in their environment. This mosaic pattern appears to be common across many lineages, not just living fossils. It suggests that organisms are not integrated units that must evolve as a whole. Different traits respond to different selective pressures, and these pressures act somewhat independently. Fourth, living fossils force us to reconsider what we mean by primitive or advanced. Coelacanths are often called primitive because they resemble ancient fish, but they're not primitive in any absolute sense. They're perfectly adapted to their environment, possessing sophisticated sensory systems, complex behaviors, and efficient physiology. Their primitive features are simply traits retained from ancient ancestors because those traits still work. The coelacanth's lobed fins aren't inferior to ray fins. They're different solutions to the problem of movement, optimized for different environments and behaviors. This realization has implications for how we view evolution broadly. There is no ladder of progress, no hierarchy of sophistication that places some organisms above others. There are only organisms well suited to their environments, whether those organisms are bacteria or coelacanths or humans. Fifth, living fossils illuminate the interplay between genetics and environment in shaping evolution. The coelacanth's slow genetic evolution results not from some intrinsic inability to change, but from stabilizing selection in an unchanging environment. Given different environmental pressures, coelacanth populations would likely evolve as quickly as other fish. This demonstrates that evolutionary rates are not fixed properties of lineages but responses to environmental context. The same genetic machinery that allows rapid evolution when environments change can maintain stasis when environments remain stable. Finally, living fossils reveal something profound about extinction. They show us that survival through mass extinctions is possible, that lineages can persist through Earth's most catastrophic moments if they occupy the right refugia and possess the right combination of traits. But they also show how precarious such survival can be. Living fossils often exist in small populations with limited ranges. They're survivors, but fragile ones, successful over geological time but vulnerable over ecological time. This paradox makes living fossils both inspiring and sobering. They demonstrate life's resilience, its ability to persist against almost impossible odds. But they also show that resilience has limits, that survival through past crises doesn't guarantee survival through future ones. And that brings us to the present, to the question of what happens to living fossils in a rapidly changing world shaped by human activity. The deep ocean that sheltered coelacanths for 66 million years is changing, not as rapidly as surface environments, not with the dramatic shifts in temperature and chemistry that affect coastal and terrestrial ecosystems, but changing nonetheless. Climate change is beginning to affect even the deep sea. Ocean temperatures are rising, slowly but measurably. In some regions, deep water temperatures have increased by several tenths of a degree Celsius over recent decades. This seems small, but remember that deep sea temperatures have been constant for millions of years. Any change represents a significant departure from the stability these creatures evolved for. Ocean acidification affects the entire water column. As atmospheric carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid, lowering pH. Surface waters show the most dramatic acidification, but the effect extends to depth. Some deep-sea organisms, particularly those with calcium carbonate shells or skeletons, may struggle, as acidification makes it harder to maintain these structures. Oxygen depletion is another concern. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen, and some regions are developing oxygen minimum zones that expand with warming. These zones can push deep-sea organisms into increasingly restricted habitats, fragmenting populations and potentially causing local extinctions. But the most immediate threat to many living fossils is direct human exploitation. Deep-sea fishing has expanded dramatically since the 1970s, as shallow water fisheries have declined. Fishing operations now reach depths that were inaccessible just decades ago, and the nets, lines, and trawls used in these operations kill deep-sea organisms indiscriminately. Coelacanths, despite being protected in several countries, still die as bycatch in gill nets and longlines. Exact numbers are unknown, but researchers estimate that several dozen coelacanths are caught accidentally each year. For a population that may number only a few hundred breeding adults, even low levels of bycatch can be unsustainable. Megamouth sharks face similar threats. Their rarity and elusive nature make it difficult to assess population trends, but the fact that most known specimens were caught in fishing gear suggests that fishing mortality may be significant. Each megamouth caught represents a meaningful loss to what is likely a very small global population. Other deep-sea living fossils face similar pressures. Frilled sharks, goblin sharks, and numerous ancient fish species are caught as bycatch. Nautiluses, valued for their beautiful shells, are harvested both for the shell trade and as bait for traps. Their slow reproduction makes them particularly vulnerable to overfishing. Deep-sea mining represents an emerging threat. companies are developing technologies to mine the seafloor for valuable minerals, particularly around hydrothermal vents and seamounts. These operations would destroy deep-sea habitats directly, removing the substrate many organisms depend on and creating plumes of sediment that could smother animals over wide areas. Some proposed mining sites overlap with habitats of rare and ancient species. The deep-sea coelacanth populations off Africa inhabit areas near potential mining zones. Destroying these habitats could eliminate populations that have existed for millions of years. Plastic pollution has reached even the deepest parts of the ocean. Microplastics have been found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, over 7 miles deep. Deep-sea organisms are ingesting these plastics, with effects we don't yet fully understand. Chemical pollutants, heavy metals, and persistent organic compounds also accumulate in deep-sea food webs, potentially affecting even large predators like coelacanths. These threats compound each other. A coelacanth population already stressed by warming water and reduced prey may be less able to sustain fishing mortality. A megamouth population affected by plastic ingestion may have reduced reproductive success, making bycatch losses more significant. The cruel irony is that these creatures survived asteroid impacts, massive volcanic eruptions, and extinction events that killed most other life on Earth, only to face threats from a single species that evolved just a few 100,000 years ago. Human activity, in just a few centuries of industrialization, is creating pressures that millions of years of natural catastrophe did not. But the story need not end in extinction. Unlike past mass extinctions caused by geological forces beyond any organism's control, modern extinctions result from human choices, and choices can change. Conservation efforts for living fossils are expanding. Coelacanths are now protected by law in several countries, with fishing bans in their known habitats. Researchers are working with local fishing communities to reduce bycatch through modified gear and fishing practices. Deep-sea protected areas are being established in various regions, though they still cover only a tiny fraction of the ocean. These protected areas can serve as refugia for deep-sea species, including living fossils, allowing populations to persist undisturbed by fishing or mining. Sustainable fishing practices are slowly being adopted in some deep-sea fisheries. These practices include gear modifications to reduce bycatch, catch limits based on scientific assessments, and restrictions on fishing in particularly sensitive areas. The deep-sea mining industry, still in its development phase, faces increasing scrutiny and calls for moratoria until environmental impacts can be better understood. Some countries have already banned deep-sea mining in their territorial waters. Public awareness of deep-sea conservation is growing. Documentaries and news coverage have brought living fossils and other deep-sea creatures to wider attention. The coelacanth, once known only to scientists, is now relatively famous, its story of rediscovery capturing public imagination. This awareness translates into support for conservation measures. When people understand that coelacanths survived for 400 million years only to face extinction from fishing nets, or that the deep-sea shelters ancient lineages found nowhere else, they're more likely to support protections for these species and habitats. But awareness and conservation measures, while necessary, may not be sufficient. Living fossils evolved for stable environments, and the rate of modern environmental change may exceed their capacity to adapt. Even if we stop all fishing tomorrow, climate change and ocean acidification will continue for decades or centuries, driven by emissions already in the atmosphere and the thermal inertia of the oceans. Some living fossils may not survive the century. Others may contract to smaller ranges or smaller populations, losing genetic diversity and becoming more vulnerable to future threats. Still others may prove more resilient than we expect, possessing hidden flexibility that allows them to adapt to changing conditions. We won't know until it happens, and by then, for some species, it may be too late. The question we face is whether we value these creatures enough to protect them, not for their economic value. They have little, not for their ecological role. Deep-sea ecosystems can probably function without them. But for what they represent, living connections to Earth's ancient past, survivors of unimaginable spans of time, testimonies to evolution's power to preserve as well as to change. If we lose living fossils like the coelacanth or megamouth shark, we don't just lose species, we lose witnesses to Earth's history, libraries of genetic information accumulated over hundreds of millions of years, and demonstrations of how life can persist through almost any catastrophe nature can devise. And we lose something harder to quantify, but perhaps more important: the sense of wonder that comes from knowing that ancient creatures still swim in the depths, that the ocean holds secrets and mysteries, that life's story extends deeper into the past than most people can imagine. That wonder, that connection to deep time and ancient life, may be what we need most. Because understanding how long living fossils have survived might help us appreciate how fleeting our own existence is, and how much care is needed to ensure that life, in all its forms, continues into the future. The deep ocean is dark and cold and vast beyond comprehension. It's hostile to humans, crushing our bodies with pressure, freezing us with cold, drowning us in darkness. We can't survive there, can barely visit there, and for most of human history we didn't even know what lay in those depths. But it's not hostile to everything. For some creatures, it's home, it's sanctuary, it's the refuge that sheltered them through times that would have killed any surface-dwelling species. The coelacanth doesn't know it's a living fossil. It doesn't understand that it represents a lineage stretching back before the age of dinosaurs. It simply lives, generation after generation, in the deep caves where its ancestors have lived for millions of years, doing what coelacanths have always done: hunting at night, sheltering during the day, reproducing slowly, existing in a world that changes so gradually that individual lifetimes perceive no change at all. The megamouth shark doesn't know how rare it is. It doesn't understand that only 300 of its kind have been seen by humans in nearly 50 years. It simply follows the vertical migration of prey, rising and sinking through the water column, filtering the darkness for the tiny organisms that sustain it, unaware that its existence astonishes scientists and rewrites textbooks. These creatures exist in a different kind of time than we do. Human civilizations rise and fall in centuries. Entire species of mammals evolve and go extinct in millions of years. But coelacanths have been coelacanths for 100 million years. Their way of life, their body plan, their ecological role, all have persisted while continents drifted, mountains rose and eroded, and ice ages came and went. It's hard to truly comprehend that kind of continuity. We measure our lives in decades, our civilizations in millennia, but deep time, the vast stretches of millions and hundreds of millions of years, operates on scales that make human history seem like a blink. And yet, here we are, a species that evolved just a few 100,000 years ago, now capable of threatening creatures that survived for geological ages. It's humbling and terrifying in equal measure. The living fossils of the deep sea teach us many things. They teach us about evolution, about how change and stasis both represent valid evolutionary strategies. They teach us about extinction, about how catastrophes shape life, and how refugia preserve it. They teach us about deep time, about the immense age of life on Earth, and the unimaginable spans of existence that preceded us. But perhaps most importantly, they teach us about our own place in nature. We're not separate from the natural world, not observers standing outside the system. We're participants, recent arrivals with outsized impacts, capable of changing in centuries what took millions of years to build. The deep ocean kept its secrets for most of human history, but now we've developed the technology to explore it, to find the creatures that live there, to understand their biology and behavior and evolution. And with that knowledge comes responsibility. We can't unknow what we've discovered. We can't unsee the coelacanth swimming upside down in its cave, the megamouth shark drifting through bioluminescent clouds of krill, the ancient lineages that persist in the deep. And knowing they exist, understanding their incredible age and evolutionary significance, we face a choice. We can continue as we have, letting fishing, pollution, and climate change affect even the deepest parts of the ocean, accepting that some ancient lineages will likely go extinct within our lifetimes. Or we can choose differently, can decide that some things, ancient lineages that survived hundreds of millions of years, are worth protecting even at some cost to ourselves. The choice won't be easy. Protecting deep-sea ecosystems means limiting fishing in areas where it might be profitable. It means preventing deep-sea mining even if valuable minerals could be extracted. It means reducing emissions even though doing so requires significant changes to how we produce energy and organize our economies. But the alternative, allowing living fossils to go extinct after they survived every other challenge Earth could present, seems far worse. It would be a profound failure of stewardship, a demonstration that we value short-term economic gain over the preservation of life's deep history. And it would mean that future generations would never know these creatures existed, never see a coelacanth swimming in the deep, never marvel at the megamouth's enormous mouth and gentle filtering lifestyle, never connect to deep time through the wonder of encountering life that looks ancient because it is ancient. The deep ocean keeps giving us gifts. It gives us living fossils that revise our understanding of evolution. It gives us connections to Earth's ancient past. It gives us reminders that life is more resilient, more persistent, and more ancient than we often appreciate. What we give back, whether protection and stewardship or continued exploitation and degradation, will say much about who we are and what we value. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you'll carry with you an image of the deep ocean, dark and cold and vast, sheltering its ancient residents. Perhaps you'll imagine a coelacanth hanging motionless in its cave, or a megamouth shark rising slowly through the darkness toward the dancing lights of bioluminescent prey. These creatures don't know we exist. They don't understand that the world above the surface has changed. They simply continue as they always have, in the stable darkness that has sheltered them for geological ages. But we know they exist. We've seen them, studied them, marveled at their persistence. And that knowledge, that awareness of life's deep history, still swimming in the ocean's depths, is both a gift and a burden. A gift because it expands our understanding of life and time and evolution. A burden because it comes with the responsibility to ensure that these ancient lineages persist into the future, to be discovered and marveled at by generations not yet born. The deep ocean is patient. It has waited millions of years before revealing its secrets. It will wait for us to decide what we value, what we're willing to protect, and what legacy we'll leave. And in the darkness, unmoved by our debates and decisions, the living fossils continue their ancient lives, swimming through the same waters their ancestors swam hundreds of millions of years ago, carrying in their bodies and behaviors the story of life's incredible persistence. Rest now. Let the darkness of sleep mirror the darkness of the deep sea. Let your mind drift down through layers of time and water, past the surface bustle, through the twilight zone, into the abyssal depths where ancient creatures swim on, unchanging and unaware. And perhaps, in your dreams, you'll swim alongside them, will see through eyes adapted to darkness, will feel the cold pressure of the deep, will understand what it means to be a living fossil, a survivor from ages past, still present, still swimming, still here. Sleep well, traveler. The deep ocean and its ancient residents will be there in the morning and in the millions of mornings after, if we choose to let them be. Thank you for joining me tonight on Worlds Beyond Seen. Until next time, may your dreams be filled with wonder, and may the mysteries of our world continue to inspire your curiosity.